Jungle Boy Jack Perry is back, which means that the Scapegoat is no more. And while it is good to see Jack Perry reunite with Luchasaurus as the Jurassic Express have come back together, it does beg the question, what about the Scapegoat? Why has AEW seemingly abandoned this storyline, and was it a failure? All that and much more is coming up right here in this video. I'm Omar Q from Wrestle Vibes. This is the failure of the Scapegoat, Jack Perry. When Jack Perry turned heel back in 2024, it felt like we were finally going to get an evolution of his character. At that point, Jack Perry had only really been a white meat babyface, a tag team partner to Luchasaurus, someone who the crowd was very much behind, someone who had all of the potential in the ring that you would ever want out of a top star, and someone who was very believable as a future world champion. He just needed an extra spark. He just felt like he needed that extra oomph to bring him up a level, and that character development was so needed for him to be that next big thing in AEW. And that heel turn was a turning point not only for him as a character, but for him in his career. This was the first time that Jack was asked to be a guy all by himself. It was the first time he was asked to be a guy carrying promo segments. He was no longer feuding with Christian Cage. He was no longer feuding with people who had that experience. It was really on him, and that is why his feud with Hook felt a little bit out of place. He was not necessarily carrying himself in the way that you would want a future champion to be, but everything changed when Jack Perry uttered those now infamous words, "Cry me a river." As soon as Jack Perry went out there at All In and called out essentially CM Punk for a backstage disagreement that they had had weeks before, it etched Jack Perry's name in pro wrestling history as the guy who made CM Punk quit. And following this, they had a fight. Jack Perry was no longer seen on AEW TV for the better part of 6 months or so, and everyone was wondering, where is he? He would later turn up in New Japan with a new gimmick. He tore up his AEW contract. It felt like they were going to play into this idea that Jack Perry was kicked out of AEW, that Tony Khan, who reportedly at the time blamed Jack Perry in real life for everything that went down with CM Punk, it felt like they were going to lean into that and we were going to get something really cool. And it all culminated in Perry's eventual return at Dynasty 2024 when he helped the Elite win, the Young Bucks reigning as the AEW Tag Team Champions, Okada reigning as the Continental Champion, and Jack Perry now at their side. It felt like this was the thing that was going to catapult Jack Perry, this scapegoat gimmick. The idea that Tony Khan had turned his back on Jack Perry, had blamed him for everything bad that happened to the company, that he had the burden of this entire company on his shoulders. That was such a great premise, and it led to another fantastic moment, arguably in a vacuum, one of the best moments in AEW Dynamite history, when the Elite beat down Tony Khan. It felt like a "where were you when this happened" moment when it did. And the follow-up to it was everything, but the follow-up to this was not what anyone wanted, was not what anyone was expecting. It was one of the most underwhelming builds to a story, builds to no real culmination that we had seen. Instead of Jack Perry being catapulted as a champion, catapulted to the head of this stable, catapulted to anything of real relevance, he just kind of was the angry guy who drove a bus. Now, don't get me wrong, he had some cool moments and he felt cool on TV at certain points, but nothing was sustainable. And even a TNT championship win wasn't enough to do it. It eventually led to him being away from TV for nearly a year. And during that entire time, everyone was asking the question, where the hell is Jack Perry? What's going on? Does he have heat? Is it something bigger? And the reality is, the reason why you didn't see Jack Perry is that Jack Perry, the Scapegoat, was just not it. AEW had promised this premise that Jack Perry would use all of the animus, would use all of the vitriol that he had built up inside him from Tony Khan, blaming him for all of the sins of the company. Sins that really you can point back to being on Tony Khan, which would have made for such a cool and meta story, but instead, the storytelling aspect of it was very inconsistent. Jack Perry most weeks was not on TV, and if you want to tell something and capitalize on a story like that, it needs to be a lot more consistent than what we got out of the Scapegoat. And it is something that has plagued AEW in storytelling week to week. And it's something that the company really needs to get a hold of, because that Elite storyline, that moment of the Elite beating up Tony Khan, something that we never thought we would see. Tony has even said before that he never ever wanted to be a character on the TV show. That deserved a follow-up. But the follow-up was just Jack Perry being angry, coming out there and just talking to people about this symbolic imagery that didn't really mean anything. It was confusing. It wasn't leading to anything. It didn't make sense. It was disconnected at certain points from what the other members of the Elite were doing. It just didn't feel right. But one thing that I can tell you is that when Jack Perry and Luchasaurus hugged each other in the middle of the ring in Toronto at AEW All Out 2025, it did. It felt like this is the direction that they are supposed to go in. It felt like this is the direction that Jack Perry is going to be in, and it felt like this is what they need to reset the character and get him back on track. The heel stuff was not working. The Scapegoat was a failure due to inconsistency and just a lack of depth to that character. I think a Jack Perry who has been through in storyline everything he has been through over the last couple of years, coming back as a babyface, coming back to bring his team the gold, and then going after singles title gold later down the line, can be compelling to keep their foot on the pedal and be consistent, because it was all there. There were concepts of really great storytelling with Jack Perry over the past couple of years. It just needs to be more often. Now, we will see what happens, but one thing I can tell you is, personally, I am very excited to see what Jack Perry does next. If you like that video, be sure to leave a thumbs up and also subscribe and watch one of these other videos from WrestleVibes.